Welcome back. Our next topic is setting up and generating donning letters. And so the first thing we want to discuss is what does donning mean? Donning is the business practice of letting customers who are overdue or delinquent know about their overdue payments, letting them know that there are a number of transactions, invoices that are overdue. Now, this is usually done through printed letter, but there are other options. You can also fax the customer a collection or donning letter or email them. So the donning letter would come in that instance as a PDF attachment. So in terms of the donning feature, what does it include? What does collection offer in terms of this donning feature? Well, we have pre-configured donning letters and that can be personalized. What does that mean? We have templates that we deliver, and we're going to be discussing those templates later on in the topic. So the templates can be edited so that you can meet your business requirements. And some of those edits can be things like inserting a logo, for example, or changing the wording in the template itself, because of course each template has a different type of wording. So in addition to that, we have flexibility to exclude customers from donning. There might be situations where your organization might decide that certain customers are going to be exempt from receiving donning letters, so you can easily do that. We have the ability also to set thresholds, and so there are two of those. I give you one here as an example, the minimum donning amount. And what that means is that this minimum donning amount is the total amount set for all overdue transactions to have correspondence generated. For example, you might have a minimum donning amount that's $100. And then, of course, if there are two overdue transactions, one for $55 and another one for $40, when you add up those two transactions, the total will be 105. And so those two transactions are going to exceed that minimum donning amount threshold that you have set. So that's something that you can use to meet certain business practices. There is another threshold, the minimum donning invoice amount. So you can take the same concept and apply it at the transaction level. So if there are transactions that have small amounts overdue, maybe there's a small remaining balance, you can decide not to send a donning letter. So the donning feature also includes the assignment of follow-up call activities. So you can assign to a collector workload. Sending the donning letter is not going to be the only thing you do. You want to make sure that you follow up afterwards, that the collector makes a phone call and interacts with the customer. So you can assign these follow-up activities in the application. There is, of course, the ability to resend donning letters. So even if you have printed a donning letter or emailed or faxed a donning letter, you have the ability to resend that donning letter, that collection letter to the customer. There's the ability also for a collector to see the donning history. So for that, I'm going to go to the application and show you how that looks. And so what I'm going to do now is navigate to the collections work area. So right now I'm logged in as a collector. So I use special credentials. And this is how it would look for a collector. So I would go here to the home page and I'm going to click on collections at the top. That will give me the opportunity here to click on the collections icon. So I'm going to click on this collections icon. That's going to take me to the collections work area. In the collections work area, we can see info tiles, and these are graphical containers that will basically tell a collector things that they have to focus on. Then, of course, at the bottom here of this landing page in the collections work area, I see a list of customers that are assigned to me, the collector. And so I'm going to go and click on this customer, Easy Solutions. And so, of course, when I get here, and I'm looking at a specific customer. There are different tabs. There's the profile tab. There's transactions, aging, etc. But what I want to highlight here is that if I go to history, at the history tab, I can see a history here in terms of correspondence, Dunning letters that have been sent to the customer and when they have been sent and what was the method. Was it email? Was it a printed Dunning letter that went in on the mail, etc. And of course we see dates as well. Who was the contact that received the letter and so on. And so that's what I wanted to show you real quick. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. And so the last thing we'd like to highlight here in terms of the Dunning feature is that it includes multiple delivery options, as I highlighted earlier on. You can print them, you can fax, Dunning letters, and of course you can email them. The email will include a PDF attachment. So let's talk about terminology here in connection with the Dunning feature. So of course there's going to be a Dunning address, and that will be a customer address. That is where that Dunning letter is going to be sent. Now of course when we are thinking about a Dunning address, since we have highlighted that you can email, fax, or print, that this address could be an electronic email address, it can be a fax number, or it can be a physical location, which of course will include a information about streets and cities and postal codes, etc. The Dunning letter, the Dunning notice is the actual letter that the customer will receive, and it will list transactions that are delinquent, that are overdue. We have templates as well, as we've highlighted earlier. So those templates are delivered by Oracle, and you have the ability to personalize them. Maybe you upload your company's logo or change the wording in the letters. So we will be discussing more about those templates coming up. Then we have the Dunning contact. That's going to be the person or persons that are contacted in the Dunning process. Of course, there's the ability to have a default name that you can pre-configure. If you don't know who the contact is, who's going to receive the letter, it can be something generic like the account payables manager. Then we have the Dunning method, and we highlighted that. We have the options of print, fax, or email. And then finally, we'd like to talk about the Business Intelligence Publisher tool. Of course, this is a reporting tool, but it also is a tool that the collections application uses to automate this Dunning process. So BI Publisher is the tool that is used to for faxing and emailing Dunning letters, Dunning correspondence. And of course, that will be the tool as well that you would use if you wanted to personalize the Dunning templates that we deliver. Now let's talk about configurations, about setups for a moment. And the first setup that we would like to highlight here is the collections preferences. And of course, there are other settings there if you navigate to the collections preferences page, but we want to focus on the ones that are related to Dunning. And we see 3 of them here. And the first one has to do with a return email address so that customers can respond back to you when they receive the Dunning letter, if they receive the Dunning letter via email. And of course, we have the ability to configure, to set how many transactions are going to be included in that collections letter. Okay, so that's just a number that you populate in the preferences to indicate a maximum of 20 overdue transactions listed, or 30 or 10 or 5, whatever number meets your business requirement. And then of course, as we highlighted earlier, if the Dunning contact is not known, you can also configure the Dunning letter to be addressed to a generic person in the organization. You might not know who that person is, the name and last name, and if you don't know, the Dunning letter can be addressed to the accounts payables manager. That's what this unknown Dunning contact means. So it's a default contact for unknown donning recipients. Okay, so let's take a look at this. What I'm going to do is go to the functional setup manager now. And so now I'm logged in as a super user. Okay, earlier when I navigated to the collections work area, I had the credentials of an end user, a collector. Now I'm a super user. So I'm going to navigate to the functional setup manager. So I'm going to take a shortcut. Of course, I can go from the navigator, but I'm going here to the settings and actions menu. And from here, I'm going to click on setup maintenance. I'm going to change the offering to financials and then navigate down to collections. That will be the functional area. And of course, I see the implementation tasks. In other words, the setups associated with collections on the right. Now here I'm going to click on Manage Collection Preferences. That's one required task that you have to complete to configure collection, to implement the collections module. So I'm going to click on that link. And here we are. So we see a number of preferences here. Some are global, so that means that all of these settings here apply to the entire collections application. And then we have preferences and correspondence right here. These settings could be business unit specific, okay, depending on how you map your reference data sets to your business units. And when I say reference data set, I'm referring to set IDs. And so here we can see the settings that we were highlighting. There's the send or return email address for donning correspondence. So we have an email address populated here. Maximum number of transactions to send with donning letters. We have set this option to 30. So there will be a maximum of 30 transactions included in a donning letter, no more than 30. Of course, here we have, when we go down to the preferences, and again, this can be business unit specific, we have the unknown donning contact, and it is set now to accounts payables. Again, it can be something like accounts payables manager as well. All right, so I'm going to return to the PowerPoint. And so we still want to discuss more setups. There is an important consideration here. And that would be to pick between two different donning methods that are available. Okay, and the first donning method here that we would like to highlight is the aged method. What does that mean? That collection letters are going to be sent to customers based on the oldest age transaction. Right, it's always going to be looking at the oldest age transaction, and of course. We want to think about what aging is, right? Aging means that you're going to be looking at the balances of the customer transactions. And when I'm thinking about customer transactions, I'm thinking about invoices, debit memos. You're going to be categorizing those balances in buckets of time, 1 to 30 days, 31 to 60 days, 61 to 90 days, and so on. So you do have to have your aging setups in place, of course, to implement the donning feature. What we are talking about here is the method that can be used to generate that donning letter. And based on that method, of course, certain transactions are going to be displayed in a donning letter. So this is the one that I see used the most by customers, the aged method, right? It's always looking for that oldest age transaction, and based on that, it's going to include those transactions in the collections letter. There is another method here, another donning method. It's called the staged method, and here this method is based on collections letters being sent based on the number of days since the last donning letter was sent. So it doesn't really look at the oldest age transaction. It looks at the number of days since the last donning letter was sent. Okay, so those are the two methods here. So of course, your organization will look at these two approaches and decides which one meets the business requirement. So you have to pick one of the two. And continuing with our discussion on the setups, we'd like to talk about the donning configuration task. So I'm going to return to the to the functional setup manager now and talk a little bit about that. One more thought on the on the dawning methods that we just described, and you might be wondering how are delinquent transactions identified. Okay, and they are identified automatically. There's a program that you need to run. It's called the Collections Delinquency Management Process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the topic. But the delinquency management process runs and identifies those delinquent transactions that need to be included in a dawning letter. And so here we are talking about this dawning configuration task. And if we look to the right, we see a number of things. We are looking at the type of dawning. Is it aged, versus staged, the dawning method that I highlighted earlier. What is the aging method? And thus the aging method is the one that you are going to use to classify those balances in buckets of time. So two different things here, right? The dawning method that I explained and the aging method. And which transactions to include, as you can see here. Do we include current invoices? Do we include disputed invoices? Okay, and then information about the aging bucket at the bottom. So a number of things to consider. Let's take a look at the at this implementation task. So I'm going to return to the functional setup manager. And so here we are looking for the manage dawning configurations. That's the name of the task. I'm going to go here and select all tasks. I'm still in the financials offering collections functional area. Look for manage dawning configurations. And of course you can use the wildcard here. That will be the percentage. Click on this. And of course, we have two rows in here, one for age, the age dawning method, and one for the stage. So I'm going to look at the aged. And so we can see here what we were looking at in the slide. There's a picture here of this dawning configuration page. Notice the options for dawning method, age versus staged. Of course, you assign a name to the configuration, and of course, you can see here the reference data set. Okay, that's going to be important because this is a configuration that's going to be used by all business units, and you can see here is the common set, or might be used by certain business units. So you're going to be assigning a reference data set based on the business requirements that you have on your end. You might decide that you have one dawning configuration for all business units, or maybe specific dawning configurations for specific business units. The aging method, and then of course if we look at this aging method, delinquency bucket 5 is the name. At the bottom we see the buckets of time. And how these buckets of time are going to be connected to a specific dawning letter, right? We deliver 4 dawning letter templates, and you can see them here, the soft, medium, hard, and final. So if it's between 1 and 30 days, right, the transaction is overdue delinquent, and it falls in this aging bucket of 1 to 30 days, you're going to send the soft, the friendly dawning letter. If it's 31 to 60 days, you're going to send the medium dawning letter. So of course the wording in these letters is going to vary. It's going to be different. You're going to be more assertive as time goes on. And then at the end, you have a final demand letter, and that will be when transactions fall in this bucket 91 days or older. Okay, so that's the configurations, and then in the middle you see which transactions to include. And of course, that's going to be something that you will discuss internally in your organization. And that's things like, are we going to send dawning letters for things that the customer is disputing? Okay, that's an important consideration there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. And return to the PowerPoint. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is the Dunning letter templates, and we deliver 4 as we highlighted. If you're interested in seeing the wording in these templates and how they look, you have to navigate to the Business Intelligence catalog. And so I'm going to give you a quick demo on how to do that. And so, of course, there's going to be a folder structure in that catalog. And any deliver object is going to be under shared folders. I'm going to go there now. What I'll do is go down to Tools, Reports and Analytics, and from there browse Catalog. Of course, I have my relevant business intelligence roles to be able to do this. Notice the folder structure at the top. We have my folder, share folder. So delivered reports, delivered objects such as these templates are going to be on their share folders. So then the next thing I want to do is go to Financials, Collections, and then of course we have Correspondence here. So that's where I'm sitting. You can always see here in the location field, it will highlight where you are. You can always see where you are by looking again here at the collection in the middle of the screen towards the top. So if I look in here, what we want to review is these collections send Dunning letters, right? If I'm going to click on Edit for this object that we see here. And then here I can see the 4 Dunning templates that can be personalized. So I'm going to look at this one, the soft one, and click on Edit. What this does is it opens up, downloads a rich text format file that I can open in Office. And then you can see here, the wording. So basically it'll have the customer, the contact first and last name, the address, the Dunning address. And, we can see the wording. This is a friendly reminder advising you that the following payments are overdue. And then it will list a number of transactions. It will include a remit to address where the customers can send the payments to. And then here at the end, we see that, an acknowledgement that if you have sent the customer, if the customer has sent the payments, that we appreciate that, and they can ignore the letter. So I'm going to close this, but that's an example of a Dunning letter template. So I'm going to close that and return to the PowerPoint. In terms of customer setups, there are a number of things that you want to review, that you want to make sure that the customer accounts and sites have. And I'm going to start by discussing the option Send Dunning letters. This is something that's going to be populated in a customer account site based on the customer profile class. The customer profile class is a configuration that will include a number of attributes that are going to be important for multiple modules, not only for receivables, but also for order management, etc. So one of the options there that's going to be inherited by a customer account or site is this option to send Dunning letters. So that's how you can decide if certain customers are going to be excluded from the process. Okay? What you do is just disable the option, and no Dunning letters are going to be sent to that customer. Okay, so this is an option that you want to see enable at the customer account and customer account site, profiles at those levels. Then, of course, you want to make sure that you select a preferred contact method that can be something like email, or maybe the customer prefers to receive Dunning letters in the mail. You want to make sure you have customer contacts and that they have been assigned to relevant purposes and responsibility types. Okay, and we're going to show you those in a moment. I'm going to navigate to look at a sample customer. So it's going to be super, super important because, of course, that collections letter is going to be addressed to that contact. In addition to this, you need to assign relevant purposes to the customer account side. And when I'm talking about these purposes, I'm thinking about build to, deliver to, donning, etc. So let's take a look at a sample customer. Okay, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go to receivables and the billing work area. And from the tasks menu, I'm gonna click on manage customers. And I'm looking for this customer that I created, Punta Cana Corporation. And so here, of course, we see the party level information, customer account level information, and customer account site. And so I'm gonna click on the customer account and go straight to profile history. This is where you assign a profile class. And of course, from the profile class, all the attributes we see here in the profile tab, in the late charges tab, are going to be inherited. They're going to trickle down from the profile class to the customer. And so here you can see, for example, the send dunning letters. Okay, that's enabled, that option, and the preferred contact method, email. Right? Some of those important options that I was highlighting. Now I'm going to go now to communication. If we look at communication, we have a contact, first and last name, and then the purposes that I was highlighting for this contact. This person is a donning contact, and then you see the purpose of collections as well. And there is an email address populated here. In terms of the responsibilities, responsibility types for the contact, we see donning, bill to, deliver to. Anyway, so that's the type of information that the donning process is going to expect to find, at the cost, for specific customers. Now I'm gonna backtrack for a second here and go down to the customer account side. So I'm gonna click on this customer account side, and of course, if we go down to the bottom, okay, of course, it will show address information, a physical address. And then the address purposes that I was highlighting, bill to, deliver to, donning, statement, ship to, those were the purposes that we were highlighting before. And of course, critical will be the donning purpose here. All right, so let me go back to the PowerPoint. And so there is a report that you can run, the Validate Customer Donning Setup report, that will help you in identifying issues with these required customer setups. Okay, and so it is a best practice to to run this report to make sure that your customers are set up correctly. Now here you can see that the mandatory parameters are business unit, business level. By business level we mean the 3 levels that you can perform collections at: customer level, customer account level, and customer account site level. And then you can run the report for specific customers if you wish to do so. But this is an important report to validate these setups that are specific to the customer, the ones that we just discussed. Now, in terms of generating donning letters, it's simple. You can run this process standalone. It's called the send donning letters process. And what that process does is generate the donning letter, and if the contact method is email, then it'll of course send an email to the customer that will include a PDF attachment, and of course the customer can open the PDF attachment and see the collections letter there. Now there is another way of generating donning letters, and that's why in the slide here you see that this note, and it's talking about the fact that this send donning letters process can also be launched automatically after the collection scoring and strategy assignment process runs. Now, what does this mean? Okay, I'm talking about the fact that you can run the send donning letters process standalone. Okay. that means that maybe you have not implemented the strategies feature in collections. When you implement the collections module, you're going to decide if you're going to implement strategies or if you're only going to do donning. Okay, so what are strategies? So, briefly, let's explain what that is. Strategies include donning, and it means also that there's a number of things that can be automated. You can assign workload to collectors. Things like making a phone call, review the customer credit limit, or et cetera, et cetera. But if you implement strategies, donning letters can be sent automatically. So basically, when you implement the strategies process, the collections application is going to look at certain data points to determine whether a customer is delinquent or not, and depending on the collection situation of the customer, is going to assign a score. And based on that score, of course, that's where the strategy tasks or work items are going to be assigned to collectors. So the reason we're talking about these here strategies, of course, that's another topic in this course, is because if you implement strategies, strategies include the donning feature. All right. So how is this process run if strategies are implemented? You just follow, the order. There's a sequential order. There are processes that need to run for strategies, right? To look at customers, assign a score to them, and then generate tasks that workload that are assigned to collectors, and also generate donning letters if applicable. So what are those processes that are run if you implement the strategies feature in collections? Well, number one, you have to run a process called refresh receivables transactions for customer account summaries. There is a very tight integration between collections and receivables. Then you run the collections delinquency management process. That's the process that looks at the transactions and determines whether they are delinquent or not. Then you run the collection scoring and strategy assignment process. That's the process that looks at the collections status or collections situation of a customer and decides what needs to be done. And maybe what needs to be done is a phone call, or maybe what needs to be done is send a donning letter automatically. And so after you run this collection scoring and strategy assignment process, that's when this send donning letter process is going to be launched automatically. Okay, and then finally, there's a fourth process that you run, update collection summary data. So basically here the summary is that, of course, you don't really have to implement strategies to use donning. You might decide, all I need is to use the donning feature. I don't need the strategies. But if you use strategies, strategies include donning. And so here I'm going to proceed to do a demo where I'm going to run the send donning letter process, and then I'll review the donning letter so that we get to have an idea of how they look like based on those predefined letter templates. Right, so I'm going to go back to the application, and what I'll do here is I'll hit cancel. I want to go to the navigator, tools, and schedule processes. I'm going to be running the donning process standalone here, outside of the strategies process or the strategies feature. So I'm going to click on schedule new process. And so here I'm looking for send donning letters Okay, and of course, I'm gonna select this program, this process, and hit OK. And it tells me that this is the process I send donning letters to delinquent customers. So I'm gonna click OK. There are a number of parameters here, including business unit and the donning configuration. So I'm gonna go with aged as opposed to staged, and populate only my customer here. Okay, there it is. I'm gonna hit OK. And so I'm only going to run this process for this customer, Punta Cana Corporation, although I can run it open for all customers if I want to. Notice the option there to populate an email address. So what I'll do here is I want to go to the top and click on Submit. So I'll refresh this process to make sure that it completes successfully. Now this process launches a sub-process or child process called Done Delivery. So I'll keep refreshing until I see a status of succeeded. Now here I can see the status is succeeded at this point, so I'm going to select this process Done Delivery. And if we navigate towards the bottom, there's an output here, so I'm going to click on the output. And now it's hard to see the Done letter here, but what I'll do is maybe save it as to my desktop. It's a PDF file, so I can minimize and open the PDF file from here. That'll be a lot easier. So I can see that today's date, it is addressed to Ben Ramirez, who is the contact for Punta Cana Corporation, and then we can see here that the letter does include 2 transactions that are overdue, and so we're just reminding the customers to please send the payment. At the bottom of the letter, then of course includes the collector's name. This takes us to the end of the course, end of the topic. In this course, we have learned how to process disputes, how to create payment promises, how to manage bankruptcy, how to set up and use strategies, and of course our last topic was how to set up and use Dunning. As we have learned what the Dunning process is, it means that this is a process we use to inform customers of overdue payments. We learn of features such as resending a Dunning letter, the delivery options that are available, print, fax, or email. We learned about the configurations to implement the Dunning features, the aged method versus the staged method, selecting a default aging method, associating aging buckets to Dunning letter templates, and of course the customer setups that need to be in place for these features to work. And then at the end of this topic, we generated a Dunning letter by running the Send Dunning Letters process. This concludes the course Managing Collections Work.